Okay. Now, tell me, what do you mean by the term risk in simple terms?
When there is a uncertainty around
When there is
in the
uncertainty relating to certain events, but risk is uncertainty quantified. Okay. Now, when the company has to formulate a risk policy, again, formulating a risk management policy, it does involve, a whole lot of effort from the top management, because you will have to first of all एस्टिमेट कि यार कहाँ कहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम हो सकता है, एंड देन यू विल हैव टू कम अप विद सॉल्यूशंस कि हाउ टू टैकल द रिस्क. ठीक है. नाउ द थियोरी ऑफ रिस्क मैनेजमेंट बेसिकली stems from the idea that there is quite a lot of volatility, that is volatility means fluctuations involved. I mean that these fluctuations could be with respect to interest rate, these fluctuations could be with respect to prices of commodities, these fluctuations could be with respect to a whole lot of different aspects. Now, the idea is that, see, if there are too many fluctuations, the company, whatever plans it has made in terms of investment in a particular project, these are based on certain assumptions like my revenue will grow by 10%, my cost will grow by X%, my cash flows will be so and so. Now, if there are huge fluctuations, then the NPV of the project might get impacted naturally. And when the NPV of the project gets impacted, it might lead to a complete change in my decision, right? मैंने decision ले लिया on the basis of my earlier assumptions, which basically promised a 10% growth in sales, 6% growth in cost, and so on and so forth. मैंने decision ले लिया कि I'm going to invest in the company. And then the growth of sales fluctuates. मतलब instead of 10%, sales grows only at 3%. So naturally, it will have an impact on the NPV calculation, correct? And naturally, that will have far-reaching consequences. Positive NPV can become negative, and it will change the way certain decisions are taken. Now, shareholders will invest in companies with a risk profile that matches you know their risk appetite basically. So if I'm investing say in a company like Reliance, it's because the risk profile of Reliance matches my expectation. The management should thus be careful of altering the risk profile of business without shareholder support. A company को suddenly, if it decides कि यार last year तक debt was 20 and equity was 80, this year let me increase the proportion of debt. Shareholders might not be willing for that because they invested in your company assuming that your debt is only one fifth of the total capital. So, investment in shares by the investors, their decision to invest in a particular company or not, they have looked at the risk profile of the company and then come to a conclusion. Suddenly, उन लोगों को ये बोलना कि now no, this doesn't work and we have changed the financing structure, they might want to withdraw their investment in the company. So, companies shouldn't make these capital structure changes without keeping in mind the expectation of shareholders. ठीक है. एक बार क्विकली गो थ्रू दिस. ठीक है.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है. Now, risk and policy decisions. The finance manager will need to make policy decisions in the areas of type of business area, operating gearing, financial gearing, and accuracy of forecast. There are certain businesses, which are very deeply impacted by seasonal fluctuations and cyclical changes. Agriculture is one such business, whereas, food delivery business is not really impacted. So, depending on the sector or depending on the area that you are operating in, it will have a far-reaching impact on it will have a far-reaching impact on how the business risk or the business profile is eventually structured. Talking about operating gearing basically talks about the presence of fixed cost in your regular cost structure. Financial gearing talks about the presence of debt in your capital structure. And why are fixed costs associated with risk? See, fixed costs are incurred regardless of the level of output, which means even if you have not produced a single unit, you are still incurring that cost. And that means it is putting a pressure on your cash flow. Fixed costs could be the reason why the business entity as a whole might face going concern crisis later, right? So you will have to, if you want to reduce your operating gearing, that is operational risk, you will have to keep the fixed cost under control. If I'm talking about financial gearing basically talks about the presence of debt in your capital structure. जितना debt ज़्यादा उतना fixed cost ज़्यादा, right? The higher the debt, the higher is the proportion of fixed cost in the capital structure. Fixed cost in the form of interest. And see, debt does not distinguish, or debt does not give you the freedom to not pay the amount when cash flows are not enough. You will still have to pay the amount regardless of the position of cash flows. So financial gearing basically is impacted by how much debt do you have in the capital structure. And accuracy of forecast. The success of any planned investment program will rely heavily on the accuracy of forecast of future cash flows, and an NPV assessment also relies on accurate calculation of the discount rate. अगर डिस्काउंट रेट आपने 10% पकड़ा है बट एक्चुअल WACC इज 18%, डोंट यू थिंक इफ यू गो फ्रॉम 10% to 18% आपका NPV will decline suddenly? It might even become negative. If the cash flow forecasts are not accurate, naturally it will have an impact on the final NPV calculation. So, accuracy of forecast and accuracy in estimation of the discount rate again will play an important role. इसमें गलती कर दिया तो your entire decision can go wrong. ठीक है. Risk framework. See, projects are, no project is without risk. And to tackle the risk, you need a risk assessment framework which focuses on risk awareness. Reliance will be placed on a large number of estimates. For all material estimates, a formal risk assessment should be carried out to identify potential risks that could affect the forecast, the probability that such a risk would occur. First of all, what is the source of risk? And second of all, the probability of that particular risk actually coming to life. अब these could be business level long term risks, or these could be risks on a daily routine basis कि यार one risk could be कि faculty का health खराब हो गया तो class is not conducted. The tactical strategic risks are affecting the overall project and the company. Tactical risks are mid level management risks which can be resolved by the mid senior level members of management. Operational risks are those which are basically affecting the day to day running of the project. ठीक है. Now, uh, have a look at different examples of what could constitute a strategic risk, what could be tactical, and what could be operational. ठीक है. Have a look. ठीक है.
Yes.
Risk assessment and monitoring. See, how do you when I was with EY, I was working in the internal audit department. But बिग फोर इंटरनल ऑडिट को इंटरनल ऑडिट नहीं बुलाता है, बिग फोर कॉल्स इट रिस्क एडवाइजरी. The job of internal audit department is primarily to identify risks across processes. A small example of operational risk is that material is accepted by the company without having adequate inspection mechanism. So you place an order, the order is delivered to you, you don't inspect whatever is delivered, and what is the outcome? The material that is delivered might not match the items that you have ordered, and again production operations will get halted. So whenever we are talking about risk management, risk one of the key aspects to identify risk is having an internal audit team. That internal audit team, will assist in identifying the risk and managing the risk. You could also have, system based controls. For example, जैसे you want to ensure that the company does not sell goods on credit to a customer who has crossed the credit limit. For example, I take आदित्य इज अ कस्टमर जिसके केस में मेरा क्रेडिट लिमिट है 5 लाख रुपीज. सो इन द सिस्टम आई हैव सेट अ कंट्रोल विच सेज दैट द if the amount due exceeds 5 lakh, no new sale invoice should be generated. ठीक है, तो मैंने सिस्टम में गया, आदित्य का अमाउंट आउटस्टैंडिंग इज 4,95,000, ही हैज नॉट येट पेड. व्हाट आई डू आफ्टर दैट इज I create a new bill worth 25,000. The moment I press enter, the system gives me a pop-up which says no new bill can be generated because the credit limit is 5 lakh. These are also some of the steps that you can put in order to mitigate the risk or reduce the risk. ठीक है. Now, this what is risk? So when you are dealing with risk, okay, this is just a very simple tool, a very simple internal control that that you can have in place. Okay. But there are various strategies of dealing with risk. The first one is risk mitigation, reducing the risk by setting in place control procedures. Like I told you, the control procedure just now, कि आदित्य के नाम पे set some credit controls. If the bill amount is greater than that, then it should, if the bill amount exceeds the credit limit, then it should not allow you to create the next bill. ठीक है. When we talk about hedging is a strategy where, I mean, you have spent a lot of time discussing different hedging instruments, right? Interest rate risk में आपने swap देखा and collar देखा and क्या कुछ नहीं देखा. So that is the hedging part. Now, uh, diversification is basically reducing the impact of one outcome by having a portfolio of different ongoing projects. Now, basically, so think of a situation where you have invested in a project in Bangladesh and the country is going through a political turmoil and your operations there might get affected. The idea is that sare ke sare projects don't start in that country because it is politically unstable. Set up projects in other countries and other geographies so that the risk there could be balanced out elsewhere. ठीक है. Now, there is the 4T approach to risk management, which has, as the name suggests, 4 T's as different policies of risk management. Tolerate risk. If the risk exposure is low, just live with it. उसके लिए like the kind of risk exposure that you have in terms of foreign exchange fluctuations for your ACCA fee payment, right? छोटा सा risk है, like हाँ रहो इसके साथ, don't have a hedging strategy, or transfer it, take an insurance cover, transfer the risk to someone else. Terminate it, don't stop that activity altogether. Don't, I mean, काम ही छोड़ दो, ACCA छोड़ दो ताकि forex fluctuation will not affect you. या फिर treat it by mitigating it, hedging or diversifying. It could be any of these items. ठीक है. Then you have different types of risks like political risk. I mean, what better time than now to understand what political risk is? Suddenly, in the last 18 months, so many countries are at loggerheads with each other. And the way they retaliate every situation is by imposing certain restrictions and quotas. है ना, कि टैरिफ डाल दिया, import duties डाल दिया, जो भी डाल दिया. So that is political risk. Exchange control regulations, limiting the limiting the amount of buy and sale of foreign currency. Introducing import quotas, import tariffs, maybe insisting on a minimum shareholding. Ki if you one can, if say for example, I want to set up operations in South Africa and I want to establish a subsidiary there, the South African government, in order to protect itself, it says ki, or in order to protect its local interest, it says ki we cannot allow you to invest more than 40%, 60% stake or decision making will be with us. So that is how company structure can also create a cause of risk in a foreign country. ठीक है, एक बार quickly go through this. So scroll. ठीक है. Yes, sir. Okay. uh Risk could also take the form of discriminatory actions where super taxes are imposed on foreign firms set at a level which is higher as compared to local businesses. You might not get unrestricted access to local borrowings, and you will have to borrow from foreign locations, thereby making the whole borrowing more expensive, or the host country could seize foreign property, right? So that could be another risk that a business entity faces. Political risk to chalo abhi, the only way to deal with political risk is having some form of a local ownership there, or entering into certain agreements which will continue to stay in force even after tensions between the two countries escalate. Or you could get political risk insurance, or maybe avoid interacting with countries where the level of risk is relatively higher, or don't operate in a politically unstable area. All of these are different ways in which political risk could be tackled. ठीक है. चलो.